Hi, everyone. Welcome to another class here, the shared housing class for real estate investors. I have Julie on again. So Julie, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. We are going to continue on from our last class, which was really deep into sober living, drug court, and some of the things that are unique to dealing with people in drug court and then also drug testing. And now we're going to talk about populations who are okay with double occupancy in a bedroom. The reason that this is important is because of the cash flow that we are all looking to make when going down this route, and also knowing some of the expectations in moving forward, right? And so Julie, let's talk about this list. This is a document from class number 1. It actually was the homework assignment for everyone here on this video. And I had asked them to consider which population they would want to serve. Now, some people are going to go with their heart and with their past, and they're going to say veterans or sober living or human trafficking. In this class right now, we're going to touch on a lot of things. Let's start though with, in your opinion, being a police officer of 27 years and sitting as a liaison for the drug court, the mental health and veterans court, and knowing that the government and nonprofits pay landlords to house populations of people, we really want to have 2 people in every room, with the exception of a house president. That's an unpaid position as it relates to the Katie's House Foundation model. So looking at this list, who do you think would be comfortable with having 2 people in a bedroom?
Well, obviously, I think veterans are used to bunking. So, I mean, that's going to be something that's, not foreign to them at all. I do think that, some of the other ones on the list that stick out to me, sober living, a lot of times they're in a position where they feel like they are in a community that they need support from. And so that would be something where, even if it wasn't exactly somebody in their immediate group, that they felt like if they weren't drinking in the room, then they wouldn't want to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, let's touch on that really quickly. If I could just interject on why double occupancy is important for accountability, what would you say?
No, I guess that's the best way to, describe it is that accountability is the, is in the forefront of the mind of the person that's in the room thinking, like, I've got this I want to do, but this other person is here and I can't do that with that person here. And so it's almost kind of like not entirely accountability, but it's an underlying accountability. It's being, responsible and being that good neighbor that we talk about in other parts of the class. And those are the kind of things that I think keep those people on track. And same kind of thing where if it maybe isn't, it could be a veteran and they're already used to bunking, but they also have the alcohol problem, that keeping them with another person keeps that accountability too.
Yep. So I will tell you also from really quick, I know we're talking about double bunking. With regard to veterans, I learned that United Way, which is hooked into some of the nonprofits for veterans, they do look for single occupancy rooms and also for rapid rehousing and some transitional housing. So these terms are important. If it's long-term housing for veterans through United Way and some of the nonprofits that are in receipt of that money and then helping to place those veterans, they may request a long-term lease under your LLC for 1 bedroom to pay for that veteran. I would recommend against that unless your finances really are okay having 1 person in each room. Let's say that you have a 5-bedroom house and you want to do 5 bedrooms for 1 year, that is different than really what Katie's House Foundation is teaching to. What we're talking about would be people coming out of a homeless shelter, perhaps, or even veterans hospital to housing. And the hospital coordinator and case manager, when you call them and you say, hey, listen, I'll take people directly out of the VA's hospital. And, instead of them being here at the hospital, they can come. They don't want to stay at the hospital, which costs, it's not about necessarily the money for the hospital, but they need to clear that bed for someone else who's more critical, and they need to move that veteran out, and they're fine having 2 people versus 1 person, and they'll pay per diem for that bed, let's say $30 per day. And, now you have to look at your length of stay. Is it going to be a few days that they're going to stay at your place? Or is it going to be, you're going to require 30 days or 60 days? But let's continue on with the double bunking. And so who else on this list do you think double bunks?
I think the aged out foster care, they're younger. I think they're a little bit more easier to kind of go with the flow. I think that they're just looking for like a temporary place. So I think, knowing that it's not going to be long term, that they're going to be there forever, that they're either, they've got some things in place, that they're going to go to school, that kind of stuff. That would be definitely.
Yeah, aged out foster care. On that note about how long people think they're going to stay versus how long they actually stay, what I have been told by the president of the National Alliance of Recovery Residences is that it's really easy for them to, once you start generating the word that you are in this space through Facebook groups or making phone calls, and you stay open to this space, then people will start applying on your website or however they need to apply. But actually, people, in my experience, they think they're only going to come for a few days. But if they have funding to stay for 12 weeks, they will stay for 12 weeks. And if they get a job and they can't find something else that's more affordable, or they don't have a credit score, right? They don't have a first month's deposit. There are barriers that they don't know exist. And so part of our job at Katie's House Foundation, and also as a landlord, I think, is to, if you want them to continue staying with you and paying, is to let them know you don't have to leave. If you're paying and you're following the house rules, unless there's some reason that they actually have to leave, like their funding is up, or I would not encourage them to leave if they are paying you.
Yeah. And even if it is, they know that their 12 weeks is up, but they have that job and they know that they've had, an opportunity to look and see what else is out there. And they see that they don't have that first month's rent and that they don't have that ability to just leave when the 12 weeks is up, that it allows them more time. And I think that just coincides with, now they're okay with the fact that they're living with somebody else because they realize how expensive it is to live on their own.
Yeah. And so looking down at the list, domestic violence victims, what do you think?
Well, I don't think that would be a comfortable situation for, if it was an actual shelter just for domestic violence female victims, I think then that's a different situation. But a lot of times when you and I've talked, we've talked about how those are the ones that are going to bring their kids. They're going to bring other people with them, that's their roommate situation is going to be a double occupancy, and it's going to already be somebody they know.
Yeah, if they do have children, they will want to probably. And
I would think that, depending on what your housing makeup is in the house at the time, whether or not it would be girl, that would be an okay situation, I think, but maybe not, depends. So that would be a really, as specific basis. So that one, I would say you'd be more likely to have a caution on the side of, if you have the one bed that's not a double occupancy, that it might be easier transition for them.
And you're saying that's specific to domestic violence victims?
Yes.
So my thought on that is, why wouldn't 2 women be comfortable bunking up?
Well, what if it was a woman that they were involved with that they had the problem with? So it just depends. And that's the thing where, like they may not, but until you get into that situation and you find out what their circumstances were, when what they were coming from and what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with, you're not really going to know.
Okay. And human trafficking victims. And that's not just sexually related, that's also labor force related. So a lot of times I think people go automatically to the sexually related, but there are people who immigrate into the United States and think that they are going to come across the American dream. I mean, they're sold on the American dream, right?
Well, and you're also talking that people that have been put into foster care also get into being trafficked. So, I think it's one of those where I think for the most part, there isn't going to be any issues when it comes to if they have a problem with another bed, because the situation that they were in is going to be way worse than what they're going to. So in that particular case, I think it would be okay. But it would be much like some of the other situations where, if they have the opportunity and it's funded and they're paid for and they feel safe there, then they're probably going to remain there. If it turns out that there's, something that happened or some kind of situation about placement and where the location is, then it may not be. But I think overall, I would say that they're going to be okay with bunking with other people.
Okay. I know there is a human trafficking nonprofit in Phoenix, Arizona, and they are constantly at capacity and looking for more commercial space. And so one of the phone calls I'm sure that you and I will be making in the future and following up with a few times will be they don't need commercial space necessarily if they want to lease or, fund the beds inside of one of our locations near Phoenix or even outside of Phoenix in some of the other states that you and I are talking about having, properties that we either rent, own, or JV with other investors on. So if you would like to be part of our alliance, everyone who's listening here, make sure that you guys let us know when you have a house available and who that is specifically for, because we are building out an Excel spreadsheet and then also some type of an online mechanism for these governments to figure out the houses that are available and pay in advance and get funding to you in advance of placement. But anyhow, okay, let's keep going on. We talked about people exiting a hospital stay. Generally, there's two people in a hospital room anyway, right?
Yeah, or it's just the circumstances where they really they can't go out on the street and they know that, so they're okay with being able to have a room that they can lay and have, a kitchen somewhere nearby, that they're, in a vulnerable state, so they're less likely to want to say, I've got to have my own room.
Yeah, I've even been on the wire lately receiving information about hospitals dumping people who I'm not sure, and this is under investigation. I'm sure you can Google it, hospital dumping for elderly, where maybe they don't know who the next of kin is and they want to exit that person from the hospital. And supposedly there's some investigation work going into them taking them like a couple streets over and just literally dumping them on the side of the road because they can only keep them in the hospital for so long, and they don't have someone like you and I or the people taking this class calling and saying, hey, listen, if they don't have next of kin.
And that's part of the whole thing that we, have kind of been talking about, and I know we're going to talk about it later, is, having that relationship and building that relationship with certain social services or certain contacts in certain areas. So if it was a hospital that you had this place nearby, there's an incentive for you to go in there and find out who the person is that does that, and handle some of those situations. And I'm willing to bet that in those cases, what they're doing is they're calling a taxi for that person and they're paying for a taxi ride to a certain location, and that's it. because the admissions people have said, okay, we're discharging you. You need to go somewhere, and they're paying for a taxi ride, and the person says, oh, I'm familiar with this place, and they take them there, and that's where they're having them exit the taxi.
So having these relationships, it's like back to the fundamentals of business where you need to save these in your contact database and not spam them, but actually give them a courtesy call every week until you've developed a relationship with that social worker or that placement officer. And then, they'll tell you when their funding is up for renewal. And a lot of times they don't have enough people applying for the funding because they just don't know about it and they're not consistently staying in touch with them. And so when you see that a grant comes up, please apply for it in advance. And then also, it's not just grants that are available, but there's just the hospital has separate money. And then there are other nonprofits who provide funding. And we'll get more into that as this class progresses. Let's continue going down here. So people exiting the justice system. So that would be, maybe coming out of a jail. Maybe not parole, right? Because I know our insurance doesn't allow for housing as a condition of parole. But can you tell us about all the other people who would apply to that are not on parole?
Well, so that might apply to somebody in the opposite side of a domestic situation. That might apply to somebody that's coming out of a charge from a domestic violence situation where they can't live back where they were living. So that would be somewhere where they're not on parole. Maybe the charges were dropped. Maybe something, like it was a bad breakup. And you're looking at somebody that's basically, they don't have any family, they don't have anywhere to go, and they're looking at, okay, I'm not, tied to the legal system anymore, and they're not feeding me, and they're not housing me, and they have the place that they were living, they can't go back to. So that would be a good thing. And then the same kind of thing where it might be somebody where they've gotten arrested, and the person that was with them says you can't come back now, or the people though that are going to either have to find their own type of housing. So they might contact you on Craigslist. And those are the ones where, and we've kind of talked about a little bit about some of the Facebook marketplace and the Craigslist ads. Those are the ones you have to screen a little bit better than you would if you were getting something from a contract that you have with a government entity or a social service entity.
Yeah, and a couple things come to mind real quick on what you just said. My mother, I actually didn't know this and until after she passed away. She was homeless. She was addicted to alcohol and crystal meth throughout her lifetime. And she wasn't very well educated because she really just wanted to be a mother. But I think in her frustration of not having the ability to work because she had 3 children and couldn't afford daycare, and also being divorced, and anyway, she just was frustrated at life. And so I'm not trying to make excuses for her. When she was using drugs, she could be violent. And I do understand now that she actually was arrested for domestic violence. And she was not welcome back because she had burnt so many bridges throughout her life due to really lack of financial literacy, lack of self-esteem, never really having a safe shared house. She did stay at different rehabs and different shared houses. And for one reason or another, maybe they weren't operated to a certain standard. I'm not sure, of course. But anyhow, so that came to mind, because she was in the justice system. And had there been more houses that were available, people can be moved between houses as well. So if you are an investor listening right now and you know that you're going to have 2 or 3 houses or maybe 10 houses in a large city, keep that in mind, that if you make friends with that probation officer or that justice system, and they do have, I understand, pretty good funding to place people right out of the jail system, and if that person ends up in your house, and like I said on the last class, maybe that's not a good environment for them and they're acting up, maybe you could put them into another house. But let's keep on moving here. So we talk about people exiting homelessness or living in their cars. Do you think that they would double bunk?
Most likely, yes, but you're always going to get, some of those people that kind of they want what they want. So I think those that are willing to bunk, and when you're offering them the room, that they realize that they're going to be in a shared room with somebody, then they're either going to say yes or no to you. So I think, you're going to get 50-50 of those. You're going to get, people that really felt like everything's been taken from them, that they don't trust anybody, that they don't want to live with anybody else, even though you give them a safe and you give them the ability to lock up their personal items, they still feel like they can't trust people. So you will get a small percentage of them that are like that, but you will probably get a fair majority of them that are, especially those that have a car, that have a way to go places, have a way to work, but they just need the roof over their head and they want it to be something that they can afford.
And when you are out on the street or in your previous career, 27 years being a police officer and dealing with, these affordable housing complexes and then the homelessness, maybe downtown or wherever they were, I constantly see that a lot of people who are homeless don't want to go into a shelter. Why do you believe that is? Is it because of the previous theft or because of mental health? And do you think they started out with mental health issues or that kind of came over the years?
Well, from my experience, I've had kids that I've known that in high school, they seemed completely normal. But then as they hit their 30s, they became mentally ill. And they had bouts of real bad off the wall kind of things, and then they would get to the hospital, they would get some of the medicine, they would get better, and it's a bad cycle. So I think when they're manic and they're not able to manage their medicine, they don't feel like they need it because they feel fine now because they've been taking it like they're supposed to, they feel much more comfortable having that outside living, that they are, it's kind of like that's all they know. And I know, and it's funny that, we talk about this a little bit. We haven't really touched on certain locations, but I know in Las Vegas, there's actually a tunnel system under their city. And this is where a lot of the homeless go. And there's like a hierarchy down there. And there's, you have certain people that if you're accepted to go down there, your first job is to keep everybody else out. And that they actually have like a whole underlying kind of like hierarchy of who's in charge and everything like that. So that might have some to do with it. Whereas, these, I think when they get to the point where they're like, you know what, I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to be in a place where I can have my own things and do my own things without having to live in this subculture. I think that those are the people that, like we talked about before, accountability for the sober people or accountability for the drug user. They've kind of reached that point in their mind where they don't want to deal with that anymore. And I think the mentally ill and some of the really able to recover from some of the drug use, you're not going to see them applying to find housing like this, to be honest with you.
So another thing that came to mind on that, if I were homeless, just as a single individual, a female, I don't think that I would be comfortable going to a public shelter, maybe for one night, but I wouldn't sleep a wink. I would be very scared. And so I would be, only because while I'm asleep, I wouldn't know who's around me.
Exactly.
And so I would think to myself that probably if I could put a tent in a park and zip it and somehow maybe lock it or something with string or a shoelace, I don't know, something even to wake me up, a bell or something, that would be enough to feel a little bit more secure. And the reason that I bring this up is because if I were putting myself in that homeless person's shoe, regardless of what walk of life they came from, but let's say that they leave one of these vulnerable situations and they didn't get directly into an apartment or their family wasn't able to let them back. so they're dealing with bad credit, probably. They don't have a job. They have to have the government assistance for some period of time. And they don't really know what your shelter, quote unquote, or your shared house is. Is it like another slum? I don't want to say slum, but they just don't know how you're operating that house. And that, I like to call it a boutique shelter because we appeal to a lot of places, a lot of people, excuse me. You might want to do sober living. And so you would just call it, you have sober living houses or halfway houses, if maybe it's people coming out of incarceration. But what I'm getting at is that you mentioned Las Vegas, and I just stayed there over the weekend. And it's interesting how branding is very important in this space and in the hotel space. And also I want to bring up Airbnb is now doing more background checks. And so people are starting to get upset because they're getting their accounts closed. They can't stay as a guest at an Airbnb. And they also can't list their property for Airbnb because they have a new company or their existing company has beefed up their background checks. And if you come back with anything, they're basically auto closing your account, and the appeal process is nonsensical, is my understanding. And this is a huge problem. People are very upset that even if they book a room for a friend, when they put that friend's ID or that family member's ID to verify who they are, and that runs through the background check, if they have something come up on the background check, they're just auto closing the accounts that are affiliated with those individuals. And that's a huge problem for people, right, who need to monetize their rental properties through Airbnb. And back to the branding, one of the reasons that we're taking the time at Katie's House Foundation to do this class is because we want, if you are affiliated with us and you go through this class, you're part of our Facebook group, and you can of course pay for additional consulting if you don't want to get your free questions answered on Facebook in the group. But the point is this: we will start over the course of 20 years building this brand. There's Oxford Houses, which is a brand all to itself. There's the National Alliance of Recovery Residences, which is a brand to itself. And those are basically a board, and they say things have to be done a certain way. Not that they have to look a certain way, but I will tell you that I always like to stay at the Hilton Garden Inn, no matter where I'm at in the country, because I know it's going to look the same in every single state, regardless of the holiday season. Every single thing will be the same. And I know that they expect excellency, and that's what I'm going to get versus any other hotel. I'm sure, right? It's just a chain. It's a chain. But the reason I bring all of this up is because we do a background check, but we don't do, the reason that I bring all of this up is because we do a background check, but we don't do a credit check. So that's one of the things that is a little bit different, because we know people have a spotty background, or I'm sorry, they have a spotty credit if they're probably in this situation, right? And so they're willing to double bunk because they don't have other options, unless, like Julie's saying, and like I was talking about, I mean, they don't know you exist. And that's the only reason that I could see that this doesn't go well, is that you don't let people know that your house exists and stay in contact with these social workers and invite them to an online tour or something, the same that you would have done for Airbnb. So, okay, let's keep.
I'm hoping that our alliance eventually is that, some social worker and goes to a conference and talks to another social worker and says, hey, I've got this Katie's house. You should see if they have any in your area. And that would allow some of these, like as a police officer, if I had somebody that was getting their house condemned, they were elderly, and Catholic Charities is only going to pay for them to live in a hotel for a week. And I was a social worker, and I knew that Katie's house had locations in my area, but I was talking to somebody else and said, hey, you should see if they have any houses located in your area. That it would be an easier, like you said, brand, or easier way to get the word out that these are homes that people can share, that it's not run amok, and that there are things in place that, policies, procedures, and that people can, live somewhere safely, and that they can afford to live there.
I love that. And that's what we're going for here. I do want to mention Katie's House Foundation. There are other Katie's houses throughout the United States, and they are nonprofits and they do different things. So just keep that in mind when it comes to, we're based in Alabama, and you can see our logo. It's a blue and white house. And as we continue on, we want you guys to make money, to sustain your house, and also to grow more houses and to grow your passive income, and obviously to help people. That's why we're all going down this path, is because we want to see our communities change. And I recognized that it was necessary to have someone like Julie on. I mean, and Julie was so, thank you for being a part of our committee, because I'm telling you guys, you have to have a clear vision for your own Katie's house. So if you want to be in the sober living space, become the absolute best at that space. If you want to deal with elderly on fixed income, become the best in that space. And again, this is why we're talking about double occupancy, because you can increase your cash flow. And also we have to talk about the insurance, which we already talked about, right? I told you guys that was about $4,000 per year for the first house, and then about $500 per year for every house thereafter. And that is in addition to your landlord policy. And so that's to cover things like sexual misconduct or general liability and things of that nature. And so this is why it's just important to know. I mean, I would recommend that you guys actually start developing a relationship with these social workers once you know what your population is going to be, before you get one of your houses ready. There's another class that I'm familiar with out there, and I think they maybe mentioned something to the opposite of that. And I just think that you can't carry a house until you have these relationships formed. So what do you think on that note, Julie?
Yeah, I think like from our perspective and from our experience, that we're saying that because we know that, yeah, there's a couple of vacancies that you might fill right away, but then when you start kind of jumbling people in the house that maybe aren't a good fit, and you've got all kinds of problems going on, you're just going to be back to square one. And so now, instead of spending the time to build those relationships and get those better referrals, you're spending your time cleaning up a mess. And those of us that have been landlords know that, somebody can look great on paper, and then you get them in your apartment, and you get them in your building, and it's a complete disaster, and you spend more time putting that fire out than you could have doing other things. And I guess those other things are building those better relationships that not only are going to bring you that consistent income with the fact that you're going to be having these policies and procedures, that you're not managing these people, but that you're offering the bed, and that you're offering them the ability to fill that bed with who they want. And that if things aren't working out while they're there, then we have the ability to have them removed, or to move them have that problem solved with not a lot of effort.
Yes, exactly. So a couple things that are really important in what you just said, a private payer versus somebody who the government is paying for. To me, I just want you guys to know you're probably always going to have a combination of that inside of a house, because even if you go to Craigslist and you advertise, right, you're hoping those people are private payers and they're actually going to pay you. And my recommendation would be to maybe stick into people that are on Social Security disability income instead of working professionals, because otherwise, if you're dealing with working professionals, they're probably not going to want to do two people to a room unless they're absolutely desperate, maybe coming out of divorce. And they have the wherewithal and the desire to go on Craigslist or roommate.com, and some of these other things that we've tried at the foundation. They've been fruitful, but not fast. And that is different than working with the government bodies like the police, for example, and finding out where do the police in your community take people when they pull them out of a domestic violence situation, and really fostering those kinds of communications to get some traction. And so a couple other things, we're going to talk on the codes to have people exiting a house, because that's different. Some of the laws that apply to what we are doing are different than a normal tenant landlord relationship. And before we get into that, which is what we're going to end the class on today, I want to talk about mental health and what Julie said earlier, which was medications. Now, there are a lot of houses, for example, Oxford houses, which we are going to be looking at here in a minute. They have a website, oxfordvacancies.com, which is where, if you have an Oxford house, it's anti-drugs. And so those are sober living. They are democratically run. There's not a lot of oversight, meaning like, a manager inside the house. At least that's my understanding. I'm going to continue to look into it because I'm actually would like to become an expert in Oxford houses because of the funding that is around those. But basically, they don't let you have any medication. And at Katie's House Foundation, we actually allow people to have medically assisted treatment. So if they're doing detox after they've gone to a detox program, or they've been in jail, then they can, not only can they have their medication for, let's say, anxiety or depression, because we give them a personal safe and they have a PIN code, and we want them to have their medication. So that way, they stay mentally right. I mean, if their doctor is giving them the medication, then that's a prescribed medication. We don't want them to abuse it. And then in addition to that, medically assisted treatment is where that individual can go outside of the house. And normally you can do free therapy, group therapy at the local hospital. Excuse me. And if you do that free group therapy, they will actually give you an injectable or a prescription of pills to take home. And depending on what you are trying to, be sober from, so you're trying to abstain from using opioids or something, then, that drug, my understanding is that it makes recovery 80% more likely.
Yeah.
And so that's different. So Oxford houses, you cannot have any medication whatsoever. But Katie's House Foundation, we are fine with people on medically assisted treatment and also having their mental health or any other like diabetes medication and these kinds of things. So Julie,
we can discuss that in a little bit in depth when maybe we talk a little bit more about the Oxford houses. But yeah, I mean, that's a critical part of sometimes becoming an actual consistently sober person. I think, and we can talk about the mental illness part too, but we were just about to talk to people who can't afford or a quality apartment, a hotel, or Airbnb, and people looking for sober living after detox we're talking about too. But those are the kind of things where they might have lost everything and now they're on depression meds, and now it's like they feel like they're feeling better and they're taking this medicine that's been prescribed to them and they feel like they can get back on the path that they were on prior. But if they are put in, or if they sign up for one of those houses where you can't take your medicine, then where does that leave them?
Yeah, I mean, that is such a great question. And I think most people don't want to go to a house that doesn't allow them to take their normal medication.
So we will have to discuss the Oxford House and their policies and procedures down the road. But I think, like to look at the rest of the list here, I think there isn't anybody else on the list that I'm really concerned about that wouldn't want to share a bed. Just to stay on the list here that we were going through.
Yeah.
I don't, obviously college students, that's, right now I think I'm paying $800 for my daughter's bed and her schooling. So, and she shares a house with other culinary students. And that's just the way that it's the best way, because the college doesn't have dorms. It doesn't have a way to do it. And they offer, a specialty, I don't want to say boutique, but it's kind of like Oxford House, right? Where it's connected directly to the school, that's where they send you to get the housing, and you have to pay for an application. You have to, they pair you with other people around your same age, and you get the housing that way, but you just get a bed and you get a roommate too.
Okay, so let's talk about roommate versus housemate. So I'm not sure if I heard you say, is she double bunked?
Yeah, she's going to have another person in her room.
And you're paying $800 a month?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an important topic, because what I would like everyone in the class to do is to take their Excel spreadsheet that we already went over, put in all of your expenses, and then add 30% and divide that by the number of beds that you can fit. And remember that the National Alliance of Recovery Residents, they say that a 10 by 10 room, you can have 2 people in that space. So that means every person gets a 5 by 10 or 50 square feet. That's how I want you guys to actually do your numbers when you are moving forward. And I would encourage you not to deviate from that, because even though we all have hearts of gold, which is why we're doing this work, the money has to make sense. And then let's talk about now time. So the reason that you're also taking this class is because we're going to tell you that you need to have a property manager who makes a commission for taking care of things for you. So that way you don't become a property manager, because you probably have a different job, or you want to travel and not be on call to people who maybe have a different expectation of boundaries than you have. And that's one thing, as well as having a house manager or a house president who lives inside. So it's really important that you continue listening to these classes as we get into the standard operating procedures, and also how to exit people from a house. So that way, if something doesn't go well and you would like for them to be removed or to exit, that you know how to do that. So let's keep on moving forward here. We have about 17 minutes left in this particular class, and I wanted to bring up the Oxford website here. Excuse me for just a minute while I do this.
Okay.
All right, here we go. I want you guys to see, this is oxfordvacancies.com. We are going to open up at Katie's House Foundation, pockethomes.org, and that will be a password protected website where if you have taken this class, then if you have a house and you are diligently working to line up government grants or contracts, then you can share that information with us, much like Airbnb, except for it's private. The reason that it's private is because you'll need to have the funding in place first from like a hospital administrator or the drug court grant or contract. And so you'll need to work on that funding first. And then you can put the house, you can let us know about it, and we can put the house on pockethomes.org, and you can share the password with the placement officer, who is going to be basically looking for, is there a house available in wherever the United States might be? And is it for sober living? Is it for veterans? And then this way they'll be able to look for that, and they could even pay for it, private pay online if they really needed to, but there should already be funding in place. But it's going to be a way for placement officers to see that how many houses are available. And so this is similar, but this is just for oxfordvacancies.com. So you have to have gone and subscribed to this sober living. So looking at this application, Julie, you had said in the last class to ask things like, are they addicted, right, to drugs and alcohol?
Yep. Well, that just gives you a little bit of idea. Now some of their funding might actually be a requirement. Like you talked about, your insurance has a requirement that you don't take a parolee in. Well, what's the easiest way to find out if they're on parole is to ask them, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I know you talked about, is this housing a condition of your parole? And that would preclude them from being part of the house. So that would be an automatic denial, and you wouldn't have to review anything else. So yeah, but you want to know enough about them to know whether or not it's going to be a fit for your house and what kind of house that you're choosing to have.
Yes. In addition to, we have had caseworkers who have them do this application. So we have our own on our website, which we will get into later. The caseworker at the hospital or at the aged out foster care at family court services, when that person turns 18 years old, will be looking for a place to put them at. So that way they don't just put them out on the street. And they're going to be saying things like, do you have a job? How much do you make? Can anyone help you with housing? Who's your emergency contact? And at that same time, if they know that you have a house, they can go to your website and fill out your application. And this is why it's important to have an application to ask these kinds of things, date of move-in. And if you want it to be in the future, these are things that you need to know. I'll tell you, we have people put down deposits, and if they don't move in within 7 days, we refund the deposit because we can't hold that room. So if they had something come up, they have to stay in the hospital a little bit longer, or they have to travel for a family emergency, we refund them the deposit and say, sorry, let us know when you can move in because that bed has to be available.
Right.
Okay. So what I wanted to pull up here before we jump off in about 10 minutes is this. You'll notice this oxfordvacancies.com apply online. Down here at the bottom, it actually says, I realize that the Oxford house to which I am applying for residency has been established in compliance with the conditions of the 2036 of the Federal Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988 as amended, which provides that federal money loaned to start the house. That means you have the house because you're a real estate investor, you own a house, and now you need to furnish it, which we already went through the furnishing list, and you need to put up those exit signs and some of the other things. And so this is providing federal money loan to start the house, requires the house residents to A, prohibit all residents from using any alcohol or illegal drugs, B, expel any resident who violates such prohibition. And so I'll tell you that they will tell people right away if they won't take a drug test. And this doesn't have to just be sober living, guys. Because as you pointed out, Julie, like even veterans, they might not be involved in sober living, but you might find out that you have someone in the house who uses drugs or alcohol and is an inconsiderate, violent person when they are on those drugs, right? And so you want to be able to expel a person if they are going to give you trouble, and especially if they're not going to pay.
Or if they relapse, maybe everything was going good, but then something happened in their life and they just took off for a day or two and now they're back and something happened where they're back on it. So yeah, you want to have that ability to have that, someone there to help with that.
Yeah. And then C, equally share household expenses, including the monthly lease payment among all residents. And don't forget your utilities, guys. Utilities are so expensive. And also they're going to fluctuate with the water use and how many people are living there. And so if you go down on your number of people, let's say that your property manager or you say, you know what, it's just easier on Craigslist just to rent by the room. Well, don't forget now that your utilities might not change that much. You don't really know how much water that person might use. You definitely need to be setting your air conditioner and locking the box off so you don't have this kind of heat and cooling that's really in flux throughout the year. I'm just saying that even household items, having a house meeting on Sundays where a house manager or house president collects $5 from every person for tinfoil maybe, or trash bags or dish soap. These are the things that have to be thought about that people maybe forget to let you know. But let's look at D. So utilize democratic decision-making within the group, including inclusion and expulsion from the group. So this means that if somebody is not a good fit and there's 8 people living there, then you can ask that person to go stand on the porch and the other 7 people get to take a vote and vote them out of the house just because they want to. In accepting these terms, the applicant understands that 2036 conditions are different than the normal due process afforded by some local landlord-tenant laws. I have read all of the material on this application form, including the limitations set forth. I have also answered each question honestly and want to achieve comfortable recovery from alcoholism and or drug addiction without relapse. So Julie, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that that is where we talk about the good neighbor policy a little bit, and we talk about them wanting to be there. And I think that, you know, when you get somebody that, you know, this is obviously, you know, you've talked, and we don't know exclusively if this is true, maybe in just some of the locations that we've heard that there's no house manager there, that, you know, having that ability to up front when they apply or when they're going to be agreeing to live there, that they understand that this is not your typical, your own apartment. You don't have the same rights. You're not looking at the same laws, that this is a way for us to control the situation, but yet collect those rents that we are looking at and that income that we're looking at.
Yes. This is the actual Public Law 100-690 that talks about this coordination of national drug policy. And I would encourage you all to read this. I will print this and include it in your materials for today's class. There is a PDF download right here that you'll want to click that actually is the legalese. And I would recommend that you read through that and then also look for your state on how that would apply to your state. And the reason that this is really important, 1, for funding, and 2, for your standard operating procedures. And let's say that you're going to, hold on really quick before you jump in. I was going to talk about exiting, making sure that you can exit.
Before you go any further though, I want to talk about this particular policy. So the only catch with this particular policy and naming this policy within that is that now you're taking that ability for some people to have some of that medication that we just talked about before. They're not going to be able to bring any medication into the house. And it's because
we need to, Julie, I think you and I need to spend more time. This is why I want to learn more about Oxford houses. I mean, I already know where we operate, that we're friends with the police and that they will remove somebody, but we haven't had to do that. So, you know, the people normally, if they stop paying, then we give them a notice to vacate. And in the state of Alabama, you can give them a 7-day notice, which is, you know, more than a 15-minute notice. Like Oxford just says, pack up your bags and get out. And they have nowhere to go but the bus stop, or they go under a bridge because it might be the middle of the night. And that's not very compassionate, right? That's not what we're after at Katie's House Foundation. We do want you to be as compassionate as you can be. But on the flip side, we've had somebody get drunk and almost burn down the house because he was completely unreasonable and intoxicated, which was a safety concern for everybody in the house. And luckily, we were able to get him to stay inside the house because he kept going outside. And I mean, he's lucky that somebody didn't punch his lights out on the sidewalk because he was just being so annoying to everyone that got off the bus 3 houses down. I mean, we thought he was for sure going to get in a physical altercation.
Well, and that's usually what, when they go off the rails, they go off the rails. So that's usually what happens. And then a lot of times there is going to be a police intervention, but perhaps in our case, there was such a motivation for this guy not to have more problems that he did, when he was asked by somebody he knew had a little bit more authority than just anybody. And that's where the problem I see with the Oxford houses is there's nobody there that you're giving an actual authority figure hat to. And without that, there's nobody else to actually, oh, I don't have to listen to you, is what I can just see them saying back to that anybody in the house, right?
Right.
So, yeah, we will definitely touch on this later, and maybe a smaller segment, like a 15-minute segment, but just so that there was no, like, that's where the touchy subject becomes, and the fine line that we have to kind of figure out a way to, like, if this particular funding that they're getting isn't allowing anything in, and that's why it's a problem, because there's a lot of reasons why people do need medicine. There's a lot of reasons why they're prescribed medicine, but at the same time, this particular funding is not allowing any type of drug.
Well, I will just tell you that for the National Alliance of Recovery Residences, which is, some people would say is kind of along the same lines as Oxford houses, but they allow in for the medically assisted treatment and medications. Of course, you need to put those in a safe so people aren't stealing medications.
And that's probably the caveats that you have to be careful to follow.
Yeah. I just will tell you, though, that also having the right insurance, which we're going to have a whole class on insurance and how to make sure that you get something that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, is important, because our insurance says that we are a shelter, that we are a nonprofit shelter. We don't have a lease. And just with that, in calling the police and letting them know that we exist and that, we're dealing with at-risk populations, they are happy to help us. But again, we did call them one time. The property manager called them, the person who was helped us out at one point, that the, higher ups had said, hey, well, this is kind of like your point of contact. She didn't answer her phone, and it wasn't even necessary. He ended up just leaving. But preemptively, the property manager had given a call just in case there might have been a problem. And so this is the real nitty gritty that we hope you guys find valuable. So that way you can know, like, okay, I have a property manager. I have called the police officers in the area, or whoever the point person is, and just let them know that I exist. And this is the insurance that I operate under, or the house that I operate under. And if somebody is being unruly, they can be removed to detox or to a homeless shelter, but you probably won't have that ever happen.
Well, especially with our policies and procedures, because when you talk about that, being a street cop, the first thing that I want to know is what I can and can't do. And if I have the knowledge before I get there that, hey, this house is run as a shelter, I do have the ability to tell the person to get out, that I will then. Whereas if I'm misinformed and I go there and I say, I can't kick you out, now you're punting the ball back to me, and I got a big problem, because technically you can. I just didn't give that information out prior, and now I'm going to have to go back and backpedal. So yeah, it's doing the communication and having that networking going up front is, like I said before, worth way more down the line when you're not having to go back and fix problems.
So we have 1 minute left. Do you think that if you were just a cop off the beat and you got sent to the house, and somebody showed you our insurance and said, listen, it says we're a nonprofit halfway house shelter, there's no lease, would that be enough evidence for you to feel
that would definitely make me feel better, but I would probably have to refer it to my bosses, which is going to take more time. Just because I can't be like, I'm at the point where it's like, it's not that I can't make decisions, but there's got to be certain places that, like, we have policies and procedures in effect in ourselves, and that we can't be violating people's rights. Right. So I can't necessarily just make that decision, but I can say, oh, definitely, let me look at that. Let me tell my boss about it. and just verify that this is in effect, that this is a shelter in our town. And that's where the communication should already have been told at roll call. Hey, this is a house that's operating as a shelter. If you get called over there, the rules don't apply for normal roommate, landlord-tenant situations.
Okay, awesome. So we are done with this class, and I will see you soon, Julie. Thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Well, thank you.